it's me, Ellen, your crazy baker chick, with another recipe for you today. I have never done developed a recipe myself for plain, old, simple, everyday white bread. And honestly, I never really planned to do so because it's not something my family eats. But I've had some requests and I thought, well, I guess I should have something basic like that on my website and in my YouTube channel. So I have developed a wonderful white bread recipe for you. I am calling it Ellen's Fluffy Soft White Bread. It's basically wonderful or wonderfully basic. Because, you know, I'm silly and I like to give funny names to my recipes. So in this recipe, there is water, and you don't need the amounts. I don't need to tell you the amounts because they're going to be in two places. There are going to be below the video in the description. If you look under where the video window where you play, there's a little where you click more, and then the recipe will be there. But even better, there will be a link to my website. And if you go to my website for the recipe, it is in PDF format, YouTube videos all embedded in everything. And it'll be easy for you to print or view or download to a file on your computer. I will tell you that the website is much better on the computer. We're still working on getting it optimized for mobile devices, but for right now, it's much easier to use on the computer. The website is ellensbreadmachinerecipes.com. Ellen's with no apostrophe because you can't have an apostrophe in a URL. So ELLENS breadmachinerecipes.com. I really suggest you go there. There's every recipe and every video I've ever made, a contact page, and also a little about me page so you know a little bit about me if you're curious. All right, so this recipe has water. I'm just gonna move that over a bit. Water. And I've already weighed these out. I don't measure, I weigh. This is half and half. For those of you in Europe or the UK, our half and half is a product we can buy at the grocery store, and it's half milk, half cream. You can also use just full fat milk. And I have oil. I happen to use grapeseed oil, but any neutral oil will do. Anything that doesn't have a strong flavor. Vegetable oil, canola oil, avocado oil, any oil that doesn't have a strong flavor. Like I wouldn't use olive oil in this, although you could use light olive oil. So neutral oil. All right. I have King Arthur bread flour. I don't get paid by them to say that. I do not get paid by any company to say anything about their products. I do get offers from time to time. I say no. I don't want to be obligated to mention a product. I mention King Arthur because it works so well for me and for no other reason. They don't pay me. I'm just gonna spread the flour a bit. Okay, and then I have sugar, just plain old granulated table sugar. I always put that on the right side. Salt, plain old table iodized salt. I put that on the left side. You can use sea salt, you can use kosher salt, but the measurements may vary, so please Google that. And I have unsalted butter. Actually, this may be salted butter. It doesn't seem to make a lot of difference. I think this is unsalted, actually. I cut it from the unsalted. And I wrote the recipe with unsalted in mind. And I put that off on one side. And then I make a little hole in the flour. And that is where the yeast go. And I only use SAF instant yeast. I use the red label SAF instant yeast for all recipes with under 40, that's 40 grams of sweetener, whether it's honey or sugar or agave or molasses or whatever. Under 40 grams, not a sweet bread, I use the red label SAF instant yeast. When I make a recipe that has 40 or more grams of sugar or other kind of sugar like honey, etc., I use the SAF instant yeast with the gold label that is made for sweeter doughs and gives you a much better rise. Why do I use SAF instant yeast? And again, they don't pay me. They don't know me. I don't get paid for any. I have no affiliate links, nothing. I use it because ever since I started using it, I have had 0 bread fails. And so it comes under the category of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It works for me. That's all I can say. Now, if you are a beginning bread maker, you should know that you need to heat your liquids and soften your butter if your bread machine doesn't have a rest or preheat at the beginning. Mine happens to, so I just can put in cold water, cold milk, cold hard butter, and it takes about 23 minutes if I'm using dough cycle, which I am, to heat the ingredients to the optimal temperature before it starts mixing and kneading the dough. So if you do not have that rest or preheat, in other words, if you press start and your bread machine starts right away, you need to heat up a little your ingredients to lukewarm, I would say, and soften your butter a bit, okay? I am going to use the dough cycle on my bread machine, and if you have a Zoe Virtuoso Plus, that's course 11. If you are baking it in the bread machine, which you absolutely can, I would choose medium crust if you have a crust setting. And this is a 2-pound recipe, and a 2-pound recipe is about 4 cups of flour or a little bit more. This has 540 grams of bread flour, which is about 4 cups. So we're going to turn off the camera for a moment. I'm going to put this in the bread machine, set it for dough. I will be checking back in with the video, showing you how to check your dough to make sure it's not too wet or too dry. If you have a Zoe Virtuoso Plus, set a timer on dough cycle, that is, set a timer for 28 minutes. For at least in my house, at 28 minutes, the rest preheat is for 23 minutes, and then the extra 5 minutes is it starts kneading, and I check it 5 minutes into kneading. I hope that made sense. I'm going to press start and set my timer on my Apple Watch for 28 minutes. Again, that's 23 minutes of rest, 5 minutes of kneading. If you are using course 1 or a basic white dough, it preheats for a little bit longer. Okay, I'll be checking in. I've mentioned this many times on other videos, but I forgot to mention it here. If you are a beginner, the reason I put the sugar on the right and the salt on the left and the yeast in the middle, nothing should be touching anything but the flour. So the sugar, it is sinking into the liquid, and that's fine. But the sugar should not be touching the salt. The sugar should not be touching the yeast. The butter should not be touching the yeast. The yeast only touches flour. The sugar only touches flour. The salt only touches flour. And none of them touch each other. No touching. You can hear my machine kneading. The timer just went off. 28 minutes, which, as I said before, is 23 minutes of rest. And that's on the dough cycle. I believe on the course 1 white, it's a longer rest period. And we're checking the dough ball. Oh, it's weird. A second ago it was absolutely perfect. Oops, sorry about the camera. It don't think it's dry. I'm going to give it another minute and check back. That was weird. Well, I guess I caught it at just the wrong moment because this dough is perfect. It's not too wet. It's tacky, tacky but not sticky. That's what you want. There's no kind of layer of dough under the paddles. That is my telltale sign that the dough is too wet. If it forms a ball and isn't sticky but is just tacky, it's a perfect dough ball. I mean, it doesn't have, I mean, there could be little rough areas like that. That's not really rough. It's just not a perfect dough ball, but it is perfect. It is just fine. I don't need to add liquid and I don't need to add flour. Be off with you. Dough has been rising for a few minutes. It's already on its way. Yay. Hello, I'm just filming this myself and I have my camera kind of propped up. So how I prepare my bread pan is I use this canola oil spray. If you are using the bread pans, I have the Williams-Sonoma Gold Touch, which are my favorite. This is a 1.5 pound loaf pan, which works perfectly for 2 pound recipes. I spray the inside really well. This is canola oil spray. It's from Costco. Anything but Pam brand should be okay. And then I take, and you probably can't see this as well, but I take a piece of parchment and I just smush it in there. And then I just kind of, push it into the creases like that. Just push it into the creases. And later on, I'll show you why this parchment makes a big difference. It really just makes the bread so much easily to take out of the loaf pan when it's hot. So what you're hearing now is what my machine does after the end of the first rise. It does a knockdown. So you can see it's risen beautifully. When I lift my lid, it stops, by the way. And it's knocking it down, or it was, there we go. It moves it a little bit, and then it'll go into the final rise. And I have 21 minutes left on my timer. So I know that some people, if you're baking in the machine, like to take the paddles out so you don't have the hole. Some of your bread machines have a timer for you to do that. I do not do that. Well, first of all, I rarely bake bread in the bread machine. I have to bake the gluten-free breads that I make in the bread machine. As you can see, it's stopped now and it's on final rise. I've never done that because honestly, the holes, when you slice the bread, the holes barely show. It doesn't bother me, but I usually use dough course anyway because I like how the crust turns out better, and also that I can control the baking time. If you use a regular course, like the white bread course that this would be if I was baking in the bread machine, it just does what it does. And if you bake in the oven, you can check your temperature and you can control your crust better by covering with foil, which I will show you. You can't do that when you're baking in the machine, but both have their pros and cons. I am retired and I have time, and so I bake in the oven. When I was working, I baked in the bread machine. So it's just a kind of a personal choice. Love you, Zoe. I know I'm a weirdo. It's on final rise now, and there are 19 minutes left. It says complete in 19 minutes. My timer just went off on the bread machine. It's ready. If you have my bread machine, a Zojirushi I can't talk today, a Zojirushi Virtuoso Plus, or a Virtuoso, or a Home Bakery Supreme, the directions are always the same. You press cancel and unplug it. Yes, unplug it. Why would you use electricity when you don't need to? The instructions say to unplug the machine. It has an internal clock that keeps the time. You can see that the dough rose really beautifully. So I'm going to take it out and I'm going to walk back over to the island. you saw me prepare this, and now I'm just going to dump this out. Quickly take out my paddles, and I never wait to do this. I squirt a little dish soap in the bottom, just a drop, and it's kind of a cold day. Even in Southern California, we get, relatively speaking, some cold. So I'm going to get some warm water, and I'm just going to really only fill it at least past the tops of the spindles, because that's where the dough can cement itself in around the spindles, and then it's really hard to get it clean. You must remove the paddles anytime you make either dough or bake in the bread machine. I've seen some people on Facebook say that they leave the paddles in and never take them out, and they just wipe out the bread machine, and I'm sorry, that's a breeding ground for bacteria. The paddles are meant to come out. If you are using dough, they just pop right out. There's no hard factor that's been baked in. If you've baked in the bread machine, what you do is you fill it with warm soapy water, wait a couple of minutes, and then just stick your fingers in, and you just kind of wiggle jiggle the paddles. You can see my wrist moving back and forth. Wiggle jiggle the paddles and pull up gently, and the paddles will come out. But you don't wait. The minute you have your bread or your dough out of the bread machine, you get it in warm soapy water, and you don't mess around with that. Okay, so I have my dough. It is really a nice, soft, lovely dough. It smells yeasty and wonderful. Just to make sure I don't have air bubbles, I'm just going to do this folding method. I never saw anyone do this, by the way. I mean, some people might do it. I'm just kind of making it up. And then I roll it in the other way. Roll it in the other way. Kind of pinch the seams. Finesse it, as we would say. I don't think I've ever used that word like that before. I mean, I've used the word finesse, but I haven't used it as a verb, I guess. And now I'm just trying to get it even and pretty. Again, kind of pinching. And this won't be a big deal. It's okay if the ends have a little windy look to them. I'm going to just put this in the loaf pan. And I made this recipe just yesterday for the first time, and it is a really good riser. Now you have several choices for doing your final rise. If your kitchen is warm, you can just cover it with a dish towel or spray some plastic wrap with oil and put it over, and then a dish towel if you're worried that it's going to stick, and leave it on your counter. But your kitchen really has to be quite warm for that. I don't take chances with that. Even in Southern California, I do it one of two ways. Either I use my little countertop oven that I have over here, and it has a proof, and I can use that, and when I hit proof in 40 minutes, it says 85 degrees. So sometimes I use that, but most of the time I just use my oven. And we're going to walk over to the oven, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. I know that if you are one of my bread people and you've seen this part before, I'm sorry, but I have to show the new people what to do. So what I do is I make sure that my rack is one step below the middle, because the bread rises really high. You don't want the top getting too close to the element. What I do, I don't have a proof button on this oven because it's older. I think we bought it in like 2004, I want to say. So it doesn't have a proof on it, but that's okay. I don't really need it. I turn on my oven to the very lowest temperature, which happens to be 170. That's as low as I can set it. I press start. There it goes. But I also set a timer immediately for only 1 minute. The 1 minute timer means that in 1 minute you turn the oven completely off. We are not preheating the oven all the way to 170. That would be too hot. It would kill your yeast. Don't do that. Don't forget to set a timer. I cannot say this enough, but I will stop it one more time. Do not forget to set a 1 minute timer. You will forget. You will be distracted. You will have a kid that comes in and says, "Mom," and you will forget. I guarantee it. Don't take a chance. Set a timer on your watch, on your phone, on your oven, egg timer, whatever kind of timer you have. Set that timer for 1 minute. Look, I can talk for 1 whole minute without stopping. Sorry, folks, I'm just trying to take up the time because we are doing this, this segment in real time. So when the timer goes off, it says end. I cancel the timer and I turn off the oven. Turn off the oven. Do not leave it on. Then when you open the oven, don't touch the element or the shelf because it could be hot. The element is definitely hot because I burnt myself on it. It is just warm in here. And I always say it feels like you go in the summertime from your nice cool house out to about an 85-degree day and you feel the heat immediately when you walk out. That's what that feels like. And it is the perfect temperature for the final rise. And I know that you probably in the past have covered your dough. I don't bother to cover it in the oven because it's a closed environment. There's no air blowing. The dough isn't going to dry out and it keeps the heat in nicely. So you don't need to worry about covering it. If you want to, you can. I just don't. I'm going to set this timer for 40 minutes for the final rise and I will update you. I will also set a timer on my watch to take it, or maybe I'll preheat the lower oven to 350 so it'll be ready to go. I don't really have to do that. But anyway, there's ways. If I use my countertop oven for proofing, then about 5 or 10 minutes before the proofing is over, I will preheat the oven, but I can't do that if I'm proofing in the oven. So my brain was going off. All right, I will show you what it looks like when it's
This is
crisp.
Ellen checking in with a rise report. Eyewitness News rise report.
You can see that it's definitely rising and we have almost 20 minutes left to go. So everything is doing great. Here's another rise report with about 2.5 minutes to go. Wow, look at that. It's so pretty. Beautiful, smooth, wonderful looking dough. Happiness. The final rise is done. I mean, that is a perfect rise. Look at how smooth. It is just absolutely gorgeous. And I have set my oven to preheat for 350 degrees. That's Fahrenheit. What I'm going to do in the beginning is when it is heated to 350, I will set a timer for either 25 or 30 minutes. And at that time, I will use a piece of foil to kind of tent over it to make sure it doesn't get too brown. But it will not be done in 30 minutes. It will be done in more like 40 to 45 minutes. So I will tent foil it at about 25 or 30 minutes. And then I will set another timer for 10 minutes and check the temperature. I want this bread to get to between 190 and 200 degrees internal temp using the instant read thermometer. I just put the bread in the oven to bake, and I want to show you my instant read thermometer. I think it's $10 or $12. It's nothing fancy. I use this brand Kaizen, showing you upside down. And I just get it on Amazon, and they last for a couple of years and then they go. I know that King Arthur has a Thermapen, which is probably a little bit better, but I don't like to make you guys spend more money, and I don't have that one anyway. So what you do is you make sure it's closed,
And then when you're ready to check the temperature of your bread, and I'm doing this one-handed, is you open the probe. Do it. Okay, I had to. And so like right now it says it's 73 degrees. And really just that first little bit where it's narrower at the point is the actual sensor. But I stick it in further because I want to make sure that my bread is done in the middle. So when this readout says at least 190 up to about 200, that is the perfect time to take the bread out. So as I said before, I set it for 30 minutes, put the foil on, and then set the timer for another 10, and then another 5, and then another 3, until I get to that optimal temperature so I know the bread is baked all the way through. I'm telling you right now, you cannot tell from the outside of the loaf if it's done on the inside. I had so many beautiful loaves of bread that when we cut into it, it was raw in the middle. For a very tiny expenditure, you have an insurance policy right here. And that, of course, is if you're using the dough course. If you're baking in the bread maker, you don't have this option. I opened the oven just a second ago, and I had set the timer for 30 minutes, and I went, oh, it's brown enough on top. I need to put the foil on. So I actually used this piece of foil yesterday. That's why it's crumply. But all I'm going to do very carefully without, and I kind of bend it a little bit, but you're not tucking it in or anything. You're just laying it on top, and I just use an individual sheet of foil that I pull out from a box, but you can, whatever, any foil you need. And then I'm going to change this timer for about 12 minutes. And then what I'm going to do is check it with my instant read thermometer that I showed you in the last segment. Can we just take a moment to admire the most gorgeous loaf? You know, I meant to explain that usually I egg wash a lot of my loaves, but since eggs are really expensive right now and I'm not putting a topping on where I need the egg wash to hold it, and this bread is pretty matte like this instead of shiny, I did not bother to egg wash. All right, so now you're going to see the reason why I use the parchment. Yes, it's to help the loaf not stick, but this is the best part. Pick this up and go through. See how easy? You're not using mitts because the bread pan is hot, trying to turn it over and having it fall on the grids of the rack and making marks or cracking your loaf. I know it seems like a waste of parchment, but it's just, this is what I do. You don't have to do it. This is what I do. Then I just kind of, and it's hot, so I just slide that sucker out and let this beauty cool off. The cameraman is getting fancy. All right, so now I have to wait a couple of hours before I can slice this to show you the inside, so we'll be back with that. Since I know some of you are going to ask me, this loaf pan is Williams Sonoma. You can see it's still wet. I just washed it. Williams Sonoma. It is their 1.5 pound loaf pan. It's the brand Williams Sonoma Gold Touch Loaf Pan 1.5 pound. No Pam spray. And these are the dimensions: 10 long, 5 wide, and 3 inches deep. And even though it says it's a 1.5 pound loaf pan, I use it for all my 2 pound recipes because I love this. See, the pan came to here. I love this big mushroom top. That is my preference. So there you go. That's, if you're going to ask me, I don't remember how much it is. I don't think it was extraordinarily expensive, and I don't think it's extraordinarily cheap either. You can look for yourself there online. If I look a little less fresh, I just finished a workout while this baby was cooling. I had a workout with my personal trainer via FaceTime. That's what I do these days. My living room is my gym. Anyway, if this is not cooled all the way through, but I think it's cooled enough that I can cut something off the end. So, are you ready for the big reveal? One of these days I'm going to draw a face on the end of the loaf. Anyway, because I'm so strange. All right. If the crumb looks as good as the one I made yesterday, I will be very happy. Yep, there it is. Now, it looks a little yellow tinged. I'm going to go turn off the kitchen lights because my cabinets are very yellow and they reflect the yellow, and it's not going to be too dark. And you're going to see that it really is a white bread. It really is a white bread. It's very white. It's not yellowy. There's no egg. But it looks a little yellowy in my kitchen because of the reflection of my cupboards. So I'm going to go turn the lights back on. I know, I've never done this one before, and my videographer's going, what the heck? Anyway, I'm going to cut one more slice because this is the end. It really is a white bread. No egg or anything yellow except for a little bit of butter. So, I want you to see that the texture is as soft and fluffy as bread could possibly be. This is as soft and fluffy as my challah or my semolina bread, which are my two softest recipes. And I'm going to do the famous rip open. And you can just see that it's very, very wonderfully soft. The crust is not a hard, crunchy crust, but it is a nice crust. It's not, you know, I didn't need to rub melted butter on it like some people do when they take it out if it has a hard crust. It doesn't crunch. For a plain white bread, because it is a plain white bread, it is delicious, and I think it's just the texture that you're going to love. Hope you enjoyed my video. Now I have a mouthful. Go to my website, ellensbreadmachinerecipes.com. I'm going to choke. PDF forms recipes, meaning you can view it, you can print it, you can download it, super easy, doesn't cost a thing. You can go to the About page, the contact page, there's an email address if you want to write to me and ask me a question anytime. Please subscribe to my channel. Please watch the videos all the way through so you don't miss anything. I give lots and lots and lots of little tidbits and stuff like that. So I hope you enjoyed my white bread. It's basically wonderful or wonderfully basic, and it's soft and fluffy. It's the kind that you could squish, you know, like how you can squish it like that. I know a lot of people like that. When I was a kid, I liked bread like that I could squish. There you go.